Welcome. You're listening to Ask the Doulas, a podcast where we talk to experts from all over the country about topics related to pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and early parenting. Let's chat.
Hello, this is Kristin Revere with Ask the Doulas, and I am so excited to chat with Ann Wallen today. Ann is the director of MaternityWise International, and our conversation today is going to be all about doulas, since she trains so many doulas and also works as a doula herself. Welcome, Ann.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I love it that we can talk birth and that I can be on your podcast. What an honor. Thank you so much.
And I am honored to have you on the show. I'd like to get into a bit about your bio. You're a respected figure in women's health with over 30 years of experience and a leading voice on global change in maternity care, particularly for those at greatest risk. You've continued to educate and empower birth professionals in more than 20 countries, contribute to a variety of curriculums, and shape the future of maternal health through your impactful role as a speaker and mentor. So yes, thank you for all of the years. And, it's amazing that you're still working as a doula to really be able to meet the changing needs of doulas that you train.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Sometimes you get into this work and you realize, oh, I've definitely been called into this. That's what I'm meant to be doing. It's what I'm supposed to be doing, what I'm here for.
Right.
And I definitely feel that way. And even though I've had a few other jobs along the way, they really even just added to my skill set as a doula and as a teacher. But I feel really passionate about the fact that we, just as women, oftentimes we really crave that community, that support from one another. And especially in American culture,
Yes.
we're really, oftentimes we're really far away from each other. We're far away from our family. And when I say really far away, I don't just mean maybe somebody in a different state, but even like we're not living in this communal format anymore. We don't have like the village where you can walk to your friend's house, your mother-in-law's house, your sister's house, whatever.
Exactly.
Most of the time, we're pretty far apart. And so just supporting one another looks different. And thank goodness for FaceTime and phones and texts and everything, but it's still not quite the same as being there in person and being able to give someone a hug and put your arm around them or cook them a meal or whatever it is that they need in that moment. But supporting families, it's so multifaceted. It can be so complicated, but it's also really, really natural. Like we crave to do it for one another, and we definitely recognize when we're in a vulnerable position like early motherhood, like pregnancy and those early parenting days, we definitely feel it. We definitely feel the need for support and for help and all those beautiful things that a doula brings, not the judgment, not
exactly
the unsolicited advice, but the actual support and that loving, nurturing. I even like to say we're modeling, we're modeling, we're a role model to other family members of how to treat the family that's growing, or the mother or the baby even, how to interact with them. Because we don't always see a healthy example.
Exactly. I was just going to say that we don't have the emotional ties that a partner or a parent does to our client. We have a professional relationship, and yes, we get to know them and care for them, but we don't have a vested interest. Where I know with my family, they had their own personal experiences with, say, breastfeeding, and I don't want to say agenda, but just how they felt things should go for me. And when I wanted to make different decisions in parenting or the type of birth that I wanted, it was met with a bit of resistance where, not all doulas are the same, but you mentioned judgment free. So just not going in with an agenda of, oh, my client needs to have an unmedicated birth or needs to do attachment parenting, like whatever it might be, or feeding a particular way.
Yeah. And some of these can end up being such hot topics. And also, science changes and things that we used to do sometimes are not helpful or even might end up being detrimental now. So even though grannies might have, really great intentions, they could still give advice that could be harmful, not knowing that we now know better, so we should do better. probably hear occasionally someone say, well, I was formula fed and I turned out okay, or I'm a cesarean baby
Right.
and I turned out okay. And that's not really helpful. It's very invalidating when you have a mom who's wanting to do something different, when they're wanting to breastfeed or they're wanting to give birth naturally or even at home. There's a lot of not just judgment, but so many opinions kind of flying around and almost hurt feelings when you don't choose what they think you should choose. So it can be really tricky to navigate.
Yes. And as you mentioned, things change. And with technology, I mean, all of the gadgets for feeding and sleep and really keeping up to date on recalls, it's like a full time job for our postpartum doula
Yes.
team to know the safest options for our clients. So, grandparents are often caregivers now because we're in a childcare crisis. And feeding is so different.
Mm.
Safe sleep, and again, products they might have used are not in use anymore. So,
Yeah,
and
but
certainly
also,
car seat safety.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say car seat safety is a whole different thing. I know like my parents had issues with navigating the modern car seats and understanding all of the changes
Right,
in modern parenting compared to how they parented me.
right. And I mean, speaking of safety, a lot of times we're really motivated. Our culture is very motivated by fear. And so we have this high, just like a high priority on a high value, I guess, on safety. And so if a person thinks, oh, well, this is the safest option, they're going to go with that versus, when it comes to birth, there's a lot of unknown. There's so much
Right.
mystery still around it, even though we can kind of physiologically explain what happens, right? There's still each individual birth goes its own way, and the hormone and chemical makeup of a person's birth experience can be super unique to them. And so there's a lot of unknowns. There's not a lot of ways to kind of predict or create like a safety plan around how birth is going to go. You just have to, I always say it's 10% plan, 90% crapshoot, right? So you're going to have to flow with it and trust that your body knows what it's doing and trust that your body and your baby can accomplish a safe birth. And a lot of times fear and that mystery piece kind of get in the way of being able to, of people, including might be grandmas, it could be partners, it could be friends, sisters, whoever's kind of in the ear of the birthing person, installing this or instilling this idea that there's danger around every corner and you've got to be overly conservative about really everything. And this is how we're now in kind of this induction crisis in the United States. And
Right.
we think anyway, that managing, or they call it active management, that managing the process is the only way to safely navigate the process. Unfortunately, that's quite the opposite. Managing the process creates an unnatural scenario where you ends up requiring more interventions because you're creating complications that didn't have to exist. And then you're managing those complications with more interventions and you get into that snowball, which maybe if you just left it all alone in the beginning and let it happen, you wouldn't have encountered all these, I call them detours you have to take. It's like,
Right.
we know where we're trying to get to, but sometimes medical intervention turns into a detour where now we're going to have to deal with this little side road. We're going to get there eventually, but might take us longer, might be a little more of a bumpy ride. But,
Exactly.
and that's the beauty of having a doula by your side, is that if your doula is well trained, she's going to know how to navigate those detours. And she's going to know also how to help you avoid them altogether. And that comes with preparation and time ahead of, I call it the big day, the day that you're in labor where it's going to end with a baby in your arms. We call that the big day, but there might be a lot of starts in the beginning, little bits of labor here and there before you actually hit to the big day. But doula who can help you prepare, get educated, know your options ahead of time, you're going to feel less under pressure to make decisions on the big day. And you can feel a little more confident in your ability also when you have more preparation and you understand what's going to happen to you and you understand what to expect at your chosen birth location. And basically, there's less surprises, even though birth is full of surprises. There's just less of them, or there's a little more predictability to what's about to happen, and you can anticipate how to navigate how things are changing and developing within the birth process, and with less fear. The more you know, the less you have to fear it. And I feel like fear is just such a big motivator to go ahead and do certain things that aren't necessarily the right timing or even necessary at all. But we're in our society anyway, we're so afraid. We're just really afraid of our own bodies, and that makes me sad.
And as you mentioned with preparation, a doula can certainly give resources, so evidence-based articles and information to have conversations with your provider during pregnancy, create, some of your preferences together at that prenatal visit, and certainly know options for comprehensive childbirth classes, whether they're in or, outside of the hospital, ranging from hypnobirthing to Bradley, gentle birth, Lamaze. There are so many options to really understand, as you said, your body, what options, what choices you have for pain relief and interventions that may come up. So it's not all unknown the day you go into labor. So you understand different things that in a non-emergent situation, you're able to ask for.
Right. And we use the acronym BRAINS. You've probably heard of that. B stands for benefits. What benefit does particular intervention have for me? What risks might be involved? A stands for alternatives. So are there any alternatives? Is there any other way that we can kind of get to where we want to go without having to use that? Is there a different option? I is for intuition. Like, what is your gut telling you? Do you have some red flags? Do you not feel at peace? Because if you don't feel at peace, don't go for it. Wait till you've got enough information, you've got that peace before you go for it. This is given that you would have enough time to make these kind of decisions and have these kind of discussions in a situation that's emergent. Obviously, you're not going to necessarily sit through all of the brain's scenario. But then there's also N. What if you do nothing? Or what if you say not now? I always tell my clients, don't create like an all or not, like a yes, no, black and white, all or nothing kind of scenario for yourself. Just say not now, because maybe in an hour or two, you're going to change your mind and you'll want to do this or that. Or maybe in 5 hours, it's going to be necessary to do this thing, whatever it is. So just be open to it and just say not now. I'm not feeling like I should do that right now. And then we always add S to the end. S being give us some space to think about it, space to talk about it, space and time. So that, again, there's not a decision being made under pressure, right? Because that feels like bullying, and we don't want, there's no place in this experience for bullying. There shouldn't be pressure or anyone feeling like they're kind of coerced into making a decision. Yeah, if there's time to have this discussion and there's not an emergency going on, then yeah, there's no reason why we can't have a little space to kind of think through this in between contractions, because that's another thing. It's like, okay, you kind of feel like I'm under the gun because there's a contraction coming. I got to give a yes or no right now. Well, actually, no, you don't. You can think it through after this contraction, and maybe after the next 5 contractions, you can continue this conversation before you make a decision. Asking for space. And these are things I teach my client families so that they understand in the moment, they don't have to feel like, well, for example, if I haven't prepared my client well enough ahead of time and I haven't really gone over brains with them for each specific scenario, let's say it's breaking their water or whatever. If my client turns to me in labor and says, "What do I do, Anne?" then I feel like, wow, I did not prepare them enough, right? Because they shouldn't have to ask me what to do.
Unless they're in the thick of it and everything, they can't recall anything you taught them, and it's like out the window.
Sure. And when that happens, I do just turn it back onto them and say, how do you feel? What do you feel like you need to do right now?
Intuition.
And because, and reminding them that the first answer that your mind gives you when you ask yourself a question, that's your intuition. So if I say to myself, should I break my water right now? I already know the answer. Before I finish even asking the question, I already know what my mind, my body, my spirit is telling me, yes or no, right? And so giving them also that confidence and that just the internal power, because we've kind of taken the power away from moms. When we started giving birth in hospitals, we kind of created this authority hierarchy, and mom's at the bottom and she really should be at the top, right? And so just reminding her that this is her body, this is her journey, this is her decision, and giving her back her power to make the choice versus feeling like she's just at the mercy of whoever's in the room making these decisions for her, about her. That's inappropriate, right? And in any other situation, we would never treat someone this way. We wouldn't walk down the street and say, "Oh, look, I think you should go into labor today. I'm going to break your water." We couldn't do that. It would never be appropriate. It would never be appropriate in any other circumstances. So why walking into a hospital does it suddenly become appropriate for us to give up all of our rights and not have any say in the game plan? Right. And so again, this is where preparation comes in, because if you don't have any kind of preparation, you're going to feel like I have to lean on the expertise of these people because I don't know anything.
Yes,
That's
100%.
That's a big piece of it.
And it's, there's so much evidence that regardless of birth outcomes, having that continuous support from a doula, not only during labor itself, but throughout pregnancy, does increase satisfaction. So again, as you had mentioned, and it's feeling like you are making informed decisions every step of the way, again, unless it's an emergency. And instead of birth just happening to you and feeling like things are not in your control at all, then there's a lot of remorse. There can be so many feelings after the birth that are just challenging to navigate.
Hey, Alyssa here. I'm just popping in to tell you about our course called Becoming. Becoming a Mother is your guide to a confident pregnancy and birth, all in a convenient 6-week online program. From birth plans to sleep training and everything in between, you'll gain the confidence and skills you need for a smooth transition to motherhood. You'll get live coaching calls with Kristin and myself, a bunch of expert videos, including chiropractic care, pelvic floor physical therapy, mental health experts, breastfeeding, and much more. You'll also get a private Facebook community with other mothers going through this at the same time as you to offer support and encouragement when you need it most. And then, of course, you'll also have direct email access to me and Kristin, in addition to the live coaching calls. If you'd like to learn more about the course, you can email us at info@goldcoastdoulas.com or check it out at thebecomingcourse.com. We'd love to see you there.
Well, and the definition of trauma is when something is happening to you and you're so scared, you're so terrified, and you feel helpless. You feel out of control, whether it's of your circumstances, of your own body, how you're being treated, and you're put in this position where it's a moment of almost terror, right? And so we look at a lot of post-pregnancy, postnatal maternal mood disorders, and it's like you've got anxiety, you've got depression, you've got OCD, and I can't help but look at it and say, how much of this is related to how she was treated during birth, right? So is there a sprinkling of PTSD in there that's kind of the root cause of all these other symptoms that we're seeing? I mean, if I'm anxious or if I'm OCD and I'm trying to control my environment, and I'm got some paranoia mixed in there, or overly cautious and overly concerned and overly doing all the things, to make sure my baby's safe and that I'm safe. That's actually looks like a trauma response, because if you've been traumatized, what do? You try to control your environment. You're in protection survival mode. And so and most people do, if you love your baby with all of your being, they're going to be kind of the object of your obsession at that point, and protecting them and making sure everything's okay with them. And you're going to question every little thing that seems maybe out of the ordinary, when it could, under another circumstance, if you haven't had your confidence taken away from you, you're going to look at your baby and just say, oh, we're in the realm of normal, right? But if you're an anxious mom, you're going to look at your baby and say, something's wrong. This might be in the realm of normal, but looks like we're outside of the realm of normal, and not really seeing things for what they are, because the anxiety's the lens you're seeing everything through. And so again, too, this is another way that doulas can help, because processing trauma takes time. It takes interaction. I spoke at the Congress on Children in San Antonio several years back. I don't know, 7, 8 years back. And my whole project basically was about how touch is a solution for trauma. So doing skin to skin with baby, breastfeeding, all these things, because when mom has been traumatized, probably baby has also been traumatized to some degree. And so getting them together can make such a huge difference and sends them leaps and bounds forward in their healing process. Because, you've probably heard the saying, the body keeps the score. There's a great book by that
Yes.
same name. And treating the body, doing somatic therapies with a mom. And this is, again, this is advanced training for doulas, but there's things that we can do as postpartum doulas just to get mom some relief, some healing, kind of connect the loop for her so that she can stop spiraling downward and really utilize her network, her baby, her own self, like work through her memories, process out the story. Just by telling the story to her postpartum doula over and over again, it might seem redundant. If the doula didn't have any kind of trauma training, the doula might think, oh, this is not normal. But for someone who's experienced trauma, telling that story over and over again and having someone listen. And I teach my doulas to use the 5 senses, like listen, ask questions about the 5 senses. What did you see? What did you hear? How did it feel? Was there funny smells? Did it taste? Did you throw up? Like, what were you drinking? Like all these things, because the body is where the trauma was felt. It's where the trauma was processed. And so using the 5 senses to kind of uncover what happened helps moms to put the pieces together in ways that like her conscious mind might not be able to do, but her subconscious, you start tapping into that, the 5 senses, and you're tapping into that subconscious mind. You can start putting the pieces together a little bit better. It feels less confusing. She can continue to repeatedly tell the story, but it becomes a healing activity rather than being on that wheel where you're spinning and you're spinning in the trauma.
And again, to have someone with some training to be able to listen with empathy and without judgment, and not having to wait until that follow-up postpartum visit to really feel like you're being heard by a professional. I find that pediatricians can be valuable because those visits are so frequent.
Yes.
In, asking questions and processing versus needing to wait for that 6-week visit.
Right. And sometimes even when you're at the 6-week visit, you've got 5 to 10 minutes with that person.
Right.
And
so
you don't
quick.
always, I've had 6 kids. I've been doing this for 30 years. As a fresh new mom, even with my 6th baby, like I still was like, okay, what's normal again? You can't really, it's good to know yourself, but sometimes you can't really recognize what's going on without that outside perspective. So somebody who really understands, looking at your behavior, looking at what you say, looking at how did your birth go, looking at how are you sleeping, all those, are you sleeping? Looking at all those pieces and kind of putting them together and saying, this is what I see. Let me help you formulate some questions to ask your doctor. Let me help you formulate like a list of symptoms maybe to take to your doctor, because otherwise moms are in a cloud of sleep deprivation and they're just there to show up for their appointment. They don't always know what questions to ask or what things to bring up or what's important, especially if it's their first baby, right? But having a doula to come in the home and get to know your family and really be working with them, and sleep deprivation is a huge one, right? So
it sure is.
Just that alone can affect just the mind, the ability to form sentences, let alone ask intelligent questions at the doctor's office. Yeah, there's just every aspect of pregnancy and early parenting. And even, my oldest is going to turn 31 and my youngest is 8. Like I have women around, God bless having loads of women around me because I'm working in the birth world, right? So I've got like all these caring, nurturing doula women around me all the time. And without our tribe, I don't know how women do it when they're all alone,
We need support, absolutely. Yeah. And so obviously that's why you were drawn to this work. And we are unfortunately running out of time, but I would love to hear any final tips you have for our listeners. And then, of course, please share how they can connect with you.
Sure. Well, okay. So MaternityWise, which is the company that I am the director for, we do maternity education, right? So we do labor doula, postpartum doula, lactation. We also have a program called Epidoula, which is all about how to support someone who's chosen to have an epidural and how to reduce their complications. We also have a childbirth educator program. We have a bunch of other programs, HIPAA certification. We have classes on how to process insurance as doulas, like just tons and tons of things.
Amazing.
Love it, right? Anything to do with birth, and we even have an infant sleep class. So our philosophy is really very much looking at the whole experience. So I love that we were able to kind of go through the whole experience today during this talk, because it's so key to know the end from the beginning. So whether you're doing postpartum, it's good to have birth education so that you can really understand what mom's talking about and give her feedback about how her birth went, because you will hear the story, right?
Right.
But
Even if
also
you don't want to be
understanding,
on call as a birth doula, still having the
yeah,
education, as you mentioned, is so
100%.
important.
100%. It's just tools in your tool belt, right? And then vice versa, like as a labor doula, a lot of times people want to just get trained as a labor doula because they think that's the most exciting part, but it doesn't end there. And you will
No.
get asked questions postpartum. You will have people trying to get your help with breastfeeding and stuff. And if you're not trained, if you don't have that additional information, you could potentially give bad advice, and it could be harmful, and not, with completely good intentions, but it could end up sabotaging a mom's breastfeeding relationship or whatever, right? And so having that full scope, full spectrum of understanding and knowledge around birth and breastfeeding and postpartum, we just feel like that's how you create better outcomes, bottom line. And so without looking at, you can't take one piece of the pie and just say this is good enough. You got to look at the entire experience and have knowledge and have wisdom to share throughout the whole experience. So the way to get trained with MaternityWise and get certified, and our programs are approved, any state that has a state registry or a Medicaid program, we are either already approved, or if they're in process, we're in process with them to get approved. So we're across the
Excellent.
nation. We're around the world too, but probably your listeners are mostly American, right?
Yes, for the most
So,
part.
yeah. So our training, if you want to look more into it, is at MaternityWise.com. It's maternity and then wise like wisdom.com. And yeah, would love to hear from your audience. But also, you have a book coming out, right? Tell me
I
about that.
do.
I want to be able to make sure that we can help promote that as well.
So it is called Supported, Your Guide to Birth and Baby. Comes out on Mother's Day, May 12th, so very soon.
Yay!
And it's basically what I wish I would have had for my own kids, and based on our online Becoming a Mother course. So understanding all of the members of your birth and baby team, what options you have for providers, where to have your baby, and all of the different, planning phases, not only prenatally, but putting as much importance in postnatal planning. And we get into everything from insurance to how to pay for your doula and baby registries and registering for services in addition to things, and how to communicate your needs with family and friends. We try to cover all of it, and then have a
That's
chapter on
fantastic.
sleep. So yes, Alyssa, my co-author, is a sleep consultant. We're both newborn care specialists and postpartum doulas, and then I'm the birth doula and childbirth educator. So I wrote the first half of the book, and she wrote the postpartum planning and feeding, and have some experts in the book as well, from board certified lactation consultant to a pediatrician to a perinatal mood disorder mental health therapist. Since doulas are not medical, we wanted to bring in some medical experts as well.
That's smart. I love that.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll have to have you back on. Again, I could talk to you forever. You are such a wealth of information.
It was super fun. I really loved that we could do this. And I'm so excited about your book, because everybody needs to get their hands on that. Any mom that's expecting, I'm sure, is going to really appreciate that knowledge to have in their own toolkit. So that's awesome.
Exactly. And I feel like my secondary audience for the book is also anyone who works with pregnant individuals and new parents would also benefit in understanding all of the options to refer, from understanding car seat safety technicians or thing, to Webster certified chiropractors, to pelvic floor physical therapists, to, again, the different types of mental health therapists. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really takes a team. A client of mine that I was just speaking to the other day, she was just saying she didn't have all these pieces. She's got a Pilates person, a yoga person, a
Right.
massage therapist, a chiropractor. Like she's got, in addition to her medical team, her OB, and then she's also got a midwife because she's she's delivering at a hospital that has midwives and OBs.
Nice.
So the team she's with has both. And then of course, she's got a doula and she's working on hiring a postpartum doula. And it's so good to be able to see people. And I know that this is about accessibility too. Not everyone can afford to have all these supportive coach-like people in their, on their journey. But if you can, and thank goodness sometimes insurance will be covering it, it's just so important because again, like we started out saying, families are very separated now and even friends, like we don't have that instant person a lot of times right there able to help
Right.
us. And it's good to have resources that we can reach out to whose eyes are looking at our situation with their own specialty in mind. And so they might have a different thing to encourage us to look into or research more or go get help with. So
Absolutely.
really important.
Well, thank you, Anne, and I hope to talk to you soon. Take good care.
Yes, thank you. You too.
Thanks for listening to Ask the Doulas. For more information about Gold Coast Doulas, visit us on our website, goldcoastdoulas.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and give us a 5-star review. Thank you. Remember, these moments are golden.